They only respected you when you pulled away, not when you gave everything. Not when you showed up every time they needed you. But the moment you went silent, something shifted. You stopped answering every call, stopped reacting to every slight, stopped being their emotional safety net. And suddenly, they didn't know who you were anymore. That's not a loss, that's power. For too long, you've been too available, too easy to reach, too quick to explain, to fix, to please. And now you're exhausted, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But here's the truth. Being always available doesn't make you valuable. It makes you disposable. This video is for the men who feel drained but don't know why. For the ones tired of being everything to everyone except themselves. For the ones ready to reclaim their time, their energy, their peace. We'll break down why being less reactive, less predictable, and less available makes you more respected, more centered, and more powerful. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear, disciplined, stoic. And you're not alone in this. Every strong man you admire once had to make this shift. Now it's your turn. If you're ready to stop being used and start being seen, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with a man who needs to hear this today. Let's begin. Everything changes when you stop being available. 1. Predictability makes you easy to control. You think you're in control because you show up, because you respond fast, because you're always ready. But the truth is, every time you react without pause, you give away a piece of yourself. And those pieces, those automatic reactions, become patterns. And those patterns become predictable. And what's predictable is easy to exploit. Predictability isn't comfort, it's exposure. It's giving away your strategy before the game begins. In chess, power doesn't belong to the loudest player. It belongs to the one who sees the pattern first. The player can read 5 moves ahead while the opponent moves on impulse. That's where the real advantage lies, in foresight, not force. So what happens when the game isn't on a board but in real life? What happens when your emotional reactions, your sighs, your frustrations, your need to explain, become moves that everyone can see coming? You're not leading, you're being led. And worse, you don't even know it. Imagine David, a driven salesman in a high-pressure industry. He's smart, ambitious, disciplined, but reactive. His competitor figured it out. All it takes is a quick jab at one of David's past failures. Just a name, just a moment, and David's focus collapses. He shifts from calm to defensive, from clear to scattered. And in that small crack, he loses. The competitor doesn't need to defeat David's logic. He only needs to provoke the old wound. Press the button. Watch the chaos unfold. This is what happens when you're emotionally predictable. You become vulnerable, not because you're weak, but because you're readable. You give the playbook to the opposition without even knowing it. And in the world of men, of leadership, of negotiation, of fatherhood, of brotherhood, readable men are easy to move, easy to use, easy to silence. Stoicism teaches us something different. It doesn't tell you to suppress emotion. It tells you to master it, to recognize it, to hold space between stimulus and response. Seneca spoke of premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining adversity before it arrives. Not to become paranoid, but to become prepared. If you know the storm will come, you don't stand beneath a tree. You quietly, internally. And when it hits, you do not move. You remain still, not frozen, still. Predictability dies the moment you stop giving people easy access to your reactions. It dies when you stop rewarding provocation with an explanation. When you choose to pause before responding, or not respond at all. That moment of stillness is where strength lives. Not in silence born of weakness, but in silence born of restraint. Not in withdrawal as avoidance, but in withdrawal as awareness. It doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become deliberate. The man who doesn't react immediately is not uncaring. He's calculating. He's not cold. He's composed. And people feel that. They feel the shift when they can no longer trigger you like they used to. When they press the button, nothing lights up. It unsettles them. Because they're not confronting the old version of you anymore. They're facing something unfamiliar, a man who knows where his power lives and refuses to give it away. This shift starts small. You're in a meeting and someone tries to provoke you. You don't rise, you breathe, you wait, you say less, or you say nothing. Later they wonder what you were thinking. That uncertainty is present. You get a message that feels accusatory. You don't respond right away. Or maybe you don't respond at all. That absence becomes a boundary. You're asked to defend your decision. You don't rush to explain. You simply hold the line. That stillness becomes identity. The world will always try to pull you into its chaos, to bait you with urgency, emotion, and guilt. And every time you bite, you confirm that you can be moved. But the man who chooses his moment, who watches first, speaks later, commands a different kind of power. Not the loud kind, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. You don't have to fight for control. You just have to stop giving it away. The next time someone pushes, don't push back. Step out of the loop. Break the pattern. Let the silence speak. Let the tension hold. That's not retreat. That's dominance. The kind you don't perform, the kind you carry. Because when you are no longer predictable, you are no longer prey. You become something else entirely. You become dangerous in the best way possible. 2. Familiarity breeds disrespect. Why is gold considered precious while air, essential to life, is taken for granted? It boils down to one word: scarcity. And the same principle applies to your presence. When something is always available, always accessible, always there, the mind stops registering it as valuable. That's not just psychology, that's economics, supply and demand. When the supply is unlimited, the perceived worth plummets, no matter how vital it is. This is true for products, for experiences, and yes, for people, especially men who never learned to protect their own presence. The more available you are, the more invisible you become. You show up at every call, you respond to every message, you say yes before thinking, you drop everything to be there. And over time, something strange happens. People stop thanking you. They stop noticing. They stop caring. Not because they're cruel, but because they've been conditioned to expect you. And what is expected becomes ignored. What is constant becomes background noise. Think of limited editions, exclusive access, VIP seating. What makes them valuable isn't always the quality, it's the rarity. The fact that not everyone gets it. The same thing happens with you. If you're always there, you're emotionally free to everyone. And when you're emotionally free, you're taken emotionally lightly. Presence without boundaries is presence without weight. You've likely experienced this without realizing it. 2 friends, one is always available, always saying just call anytime. The other is busy, focused, driven, but when they meet you, they carve out a specific time. One shows up by default, the other by decision. And your brain, without instruction, treats them differently. You value the one who gave you something limited. You prepare for it. You listen more carefully. You don't cancel last minute. Why? Because you feel the weight of their time. Because they've made it clear, not everyone gets access. And that scarcity breeds respect. But this doesn't just apply to social time. It applies to your emotional space, your presence in a relationship, your place at the table. If you're always giving, your energy, your availability, your empathy, without asking whether it's earned, you begin to cheapen what you offer. Not because it's not valuable, but because you've stripped it of boundary. What is abundant becomes assumed, and what is assumed becomes forgotten. Seneca warned of this with brutal clarity. It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Every moment spent appeasing others, every time you say yes just to avoid discomfort, every time you stretch yourself thin out of fear of being too distant. You are not just wasting time. You are teaching the world that your time has no cost, that your attention is free, that your presence is the default. And men who live on default rarely get the respect they deserve. This isn't a call to isolation, it's a call to intention. To make your time something that must be earned, not through arrogance, but through self-respect, through clarity, through restraint. You don't have to become distant to be respected. You have to become deliberate. You have to treat your energy like something limited because it is. No man has infinite hours, infinite presence, infinite bandwidth. And the ones who pretend they do end up burnt out, resentful, and unappreciated. The Stoic way is not to withdraw out of bitterness, but to engage with control. You show up when it matters. You speak when it's needed. You offer your presence not as something expected, but as something meaningful. You become the man whose silence means something, whose yes is rare, whose time, when given, is felt. Practical Stoic action looks like this. Decline the invitation that drains you. Turn off notifications that demand constant access. Set a specific time for responses instead of being available at all times. Say no to urgency that's not yours. Say nothing when you're expected to fill silence out of habit. You're not withdrawing, you're creating weight. You're building presence through absence. You're teaching others how to value you, not through noise, but through discipline. The moment you stop being familiar, you start being felt. Because now when you walk in, people notice. When you speak, people listen. When you leave, they feel the gap. That's not magic, that's mastery. The man who controls his availability controls the frame, and the man who controls the frame commands respect without demanding it. So ask yourself, who gets access to you too easily? Who treats your time like air, vital yet unnoticed? What would happen if you pulled back, not in anger, but in quiet authority? What would shift if you stopped being everywhere and started being where it matters most? You don't need to prove your value, you need to protect it. And it starts by understanding this. When your presence becomes rare, your presence becomes powerful. 3. Silence breaks the game. In a world drowning in noise and reaction, what's the most underestimated power move a man can make? Silence. It shifts the entire dynamic faster than any argument. Not because it's passive, but because it forces everything else to be revealed. When you stop speaking, the room gets louder, not from you, but from them. The silence you hold becomes a mirror, and in that reflection, people often meet their own masks, their own intentions, their own chaos. There's a reason why manipulators hate silence. They rely on your words to keep control. They need your reactions to anchor the narrative. But the moment you go still, they're left alone with the weight of their own motives. And most people can't stand the sound of their own unfiltered mind. Silence becomes a spotlight, not on you, but on them. In high-stakes negotiations, seasoned professionals don't interrupt. They pause. They let the silence grow heavy. In one case, during a corporate merger, two teams sat across a polished table. One side made their offer, the other side said nothing. No counter, no facial expression, just a calm, still presence. 10 seconds passed, then 30. By the time a full minute ticked by, the offering team began to squirm. They adjusted terms, spoke again, revealed more than they should have. And just like that, the balance shifted, not through power plays, but through practiced restraint. That's what silence does. It takes control without a single raised word. It disarms without confrontation, and it speaks a message that can't be argued. I do not owe you my reaction. Marcus Aurelius wrote not just about discipline in action, but in thought. He understood that the most dangerous man is the one who watches without reacting, who feels without flinching, who listens more to his own soul than the noise around him. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." Silence is how you avoid becoming what tried to harm you. Because reacting, out of pride, anger, and insecurity, makes you just another moving target. But stillness makes you unreadable. And unreadable men can't be played. There's a shift that happens when you stop reacting. People don't know what to do with it. They fill the gap with more words, more assumptions, and more projections. They guess, they scramble, they fumble. But what they're really facing isn't your silence. They're facing the absence of control. And in that absence, their mask slips. Think of every heated exchange where the outcome could have changed had you just said nothing. No defense, no counterattack, just presence. Think of the arguments that only escalated because your words added fuel. Think of how many moments you wish you had paused, not responded. That regret is a teacher. But stillness is your future. Silence isn't a weakness, it's intelligence, it's selection, it's the choice to observe instead of perform. It's the space between being triggered and choosing who you want to be. And it's not just strategic, it's spiritual. Because a man who can be silent in discomfort is a man who's not ruled by the room. He rules himself. The Stoic doesn't seek silence to disappear. He chooses silence to remain unshaken, to remain intact, to remain sovereign. This kind of silence isn't the absence of voice, it's the presence of control. It's standing in the storm and realizing you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to hold your ground. Action doesn't always mean doing something. Sometimes the most stoic act is to do nothing, deliberately. Let the other person unravel. Let the noise run its course. You are not responsible for their spiral. You are only responsible for your stillness. That's where the respect begins. So next time someone provokes you, don't fall into the trap. Don't explain, don't defend, don't perform. Just watch. Feel the discomfort rise and let it pass. Let your silence speak what words never could. And if you must act, let it be calm. Let it be clean. Let it be earned. Because in the end, a man who can sit in silence and still own the room is a man no one forgets. And when you break the game without saying a word, you've already won. 4. The strength to say no. Your yes means nothing if the option to say no never truly existed. Real strength isn't in approval. It's in alignment. In choosing actions that follow your internal compass, not the currents of external demand. Every time you agree just to keep peace, just to be liked, just to avoid conflict, you betray something sacred, your own sovereignty. There was a man I once knew. He was kind, dependable, always the one others called when they needed help. At first it looked like strength, like virtue, but over time, you could see the weight settle in his shoulders. The delay in his eyes when another request came. He said yes out of habit, not conviction. And that's where the damage began. Not from what he gave, but from what he never allowed himself to refuse. His time, his energy, his evenings, his weekends, all handed away in exchange for validation. Quietly, he was becoming exhausted. Not because others asked too much, but because he never learned to draw a line. Stoicism draws that line with precision. Epictetus said we must distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Our choices, our judgments, our actions, these are ours. Other people's opinions, their expectations, their urgency, those belong to them. When you say no to something that violates your time, your focus, or your values, you're not rejecting them. You're protecting what's yours. You're practicing sovereignty. You're acting, not reacting. But the world punishes men who don't bend. You say no, and suddenly you're difficult, cold, selfish. They're not used to boundaries because they were used to your compliance. The more you gave, the more they took. And every yes you said to avoid guilt was a no you whispered to yourself. That's how men become invisible. Not by leaving, but by being too present for things that don't serve them. There's a quiet kind of courage in refusal. The courage to disappoint others instead of abandoning yourself. The courage to risk being misunderstood so you can remain honest. Saying no doesn't require an explanation. It doesn't demand defense. It only requires clarity. If you're always explaining your boundaries, they're not boundaries, they're negotiations. And what's up for negotiation can always be pushed. That's why you say no and let it stand. This isn't about being rigid. It's about being rooted. You know what matters to you, so you protect it. You don't fill every gap in someone else's calendar. You don't solve every problem thrown your way. You don't let guilt become your guide. And when you do say yes, it's clean. It's deliberate. It means something, because it comes from choice, not compulsion. Look at your life right now. How many yeses are you still paying for? How many favors, meetings, and obligations did you accept while your gut told you no? How often have you smiled while saying it, only to feel something in you grow quieter every time? That quiet becomes a warning. Ignore it long enough, and it becomes resentment. Let it fester, and it becomes a slow erasure of your own identity. The Stoic man doesn't live to please. He lives to be in alignment. He knows his peace is a limited resource. He doesn't distribute it to whoever knocks the loudest. He guards it, honors it, and in doing so, becomes a force people can no longer manipulate with guilt or urgency. You stop being the emotional fireman everyone calls when their world burns. You become the man who carries his own fire, controlled, directed, sovereign. Next time someone asks for your time, your help, your involvement, pause. Ask yourself, does this align with who I am? Or is this just another attempt to keep others comfortable while I grow colder inside? And if the answer doesn't feel clean, let your silence carry the weight. Let your no arrive without apology. You don't need to explain your peace. You only need to protect it. Because in a world where men are told to say yes to everything, the ones who learn to say no, without flinching, without guilt, are the ones who stand tall when everyone else is running on empty. And their lives, though smaller in appearance, are sharper in meaning. Focused, clear, uncompromised. You don't owe your energy to anyone who feels entitled to it. And every time you choose peace over people-pleasing, you reclaim the ground beneath your feet. That's not rebellion, that's self-respect. That's the kind of power that doesn't need to shout, because it's already decided. 5. Pleasing everyone is self-betrayal. Trying to be the nice guy everyone likes might feel good momentarily, but it's a race you'll never win. Worse, the real price you pay is losing pieces of yourself along the way. You think you're building a connection, but what you're really doing is bargaining with your identity, sacrificing your truth in exchange for temporary approval. You laugh when it's not funny, you agree when you shouldn't, you say yes while your gut screams no. And slowly you become a shadow, someone who reflects what others want but no longer remembers who he is. This kind of pleasing isn't kindness, it's fear in disguise. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being left alone with no one to mirror back a sense of worth. That fear is ancient, wired deep into the survival brain. Back then, being accepted meant staying alive. But today, that same instinct is corrupt. It's manipulated by modern relationships, fake friendships, social media, and performance-based validation. You don't adapt to survive anymore. You adapt to be liked. And that shift, subtle at first, becomes a habit. You end up shaping yourself around other people's moods, needs, and judgments, until your own reflection feels foreign. It's like a chameleon that changes colors so often it forgets its natural skin. At some point, blending in becomes an identity. But you're not meant to disappear into the crowd. You're meant to stand firm in who you are, and that can't happen if your worth is built on applause. Stoic philosophy rejects this need for approval. Marcus Aurelius said it best, "Stop arguing about what a good man should be one." That doesn't mean being who they want, it means aligning your actions with your nature. Not with their expectations, not with your fear, with your virtue, with your truth. The Stoic man doesn't need everyone to agree. He needs to look in the mirror and recognize the man staring back. That is enough. But here's the trap. People will always reward your compliance. They'll call you generous, easygoing, supportive. You'll hear things like "you're such a good guy," and part of you will eat that up. It feels like a connection, until the day you realize it's not respect they're giving you, it's dependence. They like you because you're useful, predictable, harmless, and the moment you stop playing the part, they'll turn. That's when the truth hits hardest. That what they loved wasn't you, it was your willingness to disappear for them. That's why trying to please everyone always backfires. The approval isn't real, it's rented, conditional. And every time you act just to keep it, you betray your own nature. You twist, shrink, and compromise. You lie with a smile, and the worst part, no one ever asks you to. They just learn that you will. So you must decide, do you want to be liked by everyone or respected by yourself? Because the two don't live in the same room. Self-respect is built on consistency, integrity, boundaries. You don't bend when things get awkward. You don't flatter when you should challenge. You don't vanish to make someone else comfortable. You remain, unshaken, aligned, even if it costs you attention, even if it makes you misunderstood. Because losing fake admiration is better than losing yourself. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. You can still be kind without abandoning your core. Still, help others without harming your boundaries. Still connect without selling your silence. But to do that, you must stop chasing approval like it's currency. You must value truth over harmony, even if that truth creates tension. Real men are not defined by how many people like them. They're defined by how few people can shake them. You don't need to explain your every no. You don't need to soften your edges for comfort. You don't need to nod along to keep peace. Peace built on pretending isn't peace. It's performance. And performances always end. So next time you catch yourself twisting your words to be liked, or smiling when you feel unseen, pause. Ask yourself, is this who I am, or just who I've learned to be? Then walk away from the script. Stop being the man who changes colors to match the room. Start being the man who makes the room adjust to his presence. Because the moment you stop pleasing everyone is the moment you start respecting yourself. And that's when you become truly powerful. Quietly, steadily, without apology. 6. Lose the mask, reclaim your identity, that "I'm good, everything's fine" mask so many men wear. It feels safe, but it's slowly suffocating the real you underneath. You wear it because the world rewards stability, composure, and control. But over time, it becomes less of a choice and more of a cage. You smile when you want to scream. You nod when your gut says no. You perform. And the more convincing the performance, the more invisible you become. The most dangerous thing about the mask is how normal it starts to feel. Like wearing shoes that don't fit. Tight. Painful, but polished. Eventually, you forget the discomfort and your feet begin to reshape around the illusion. Until one day, you take the shoes off and you realize you no longer recognize your own stance. That's what the mask does. It doesn't just hide you, it distorts you. It erases the quiet man underneath, who still remembers what it feels like to live from the truth. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social face we show the world to survive its demands. It's not evil, it's functional. But left unchecked, it replaces the self entirely. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Most men walk around thinking they've chosen their roles, but it's not a choice if you've never questioned who's doing the choosing. The mask is part of the unconscious. You don't notice it until everything feels scripted, and you start forgetting who wrote the lines. The Stoics didn't speak in terms of masks, but they understood something deeper. Epictetus taught that we each have a role in life and we must play it well, but not at the cost of our nature. Not at the expense of truth. He wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's not about role-playing. That's about integrity, alignment, action rooted in clarity, which is the opposite of hiding. Wearing the mask might keep things peaceful on the outside, but inside, you're at war. Every suppressed emotion becomes a knot in the chest. Every unspoken truth becomes a fracture. You learn to fake strength by avoiding tension, but Stoic strength doesn't avoid, it endures. It faces discomfort without flinching. And the deepest discomfort isn't confrontation, it's revealing who you really are when no one asks. Men fear that if they drop the mask, they'll be rejected, judged, mocked. But what's worse, being misunderstood for your truth or being loved for your lie. The truth is, many will resist when you start showing up as yourself, because the mask was convenient for them. It required nothing, but your real self, your unfiltered presence, demands attention. It can't be molded, it doesn't bend, and that unsettles people who are comfortable with your silence. You don't need to announce it, you don't need to explain. You simply stop performing. You let go of the impulse to smile when something feels wrong. You stop justifying your peace. You stop rushing to match everyone's rhythm. You move at your own pace. You speak less, but say more. You look people in the eye without offering the version they prefer. You become the man behind the mask. And suddenly the air gets clearer. It's not easy. Dropping the act means confronting what you've abandoned. The hobbies, the opinions, the standards, the silence. You dig through layers of performance and find the man you buried to survive. But here's the truth. That man isn't weak. He's just been waiting for you to choose him again. To speak from your chest, to live without rehearsal. And when you do, something changes. People respond differently. Some pull away because they are attached to the mask. Others draw closer because they've been wearing one too. Your courage gives them permission to breathe deeper, to drop their act. And that ripple of authenticity spreads, not through words, but through presence. Real power isn't about dominating the room. It's about walking into it and not shrinking. It's about being fully there, without apology, without costume. That kind of presence can't be faked. It comes from depth, from the quiet man who's done hiding, from the one who chose truth over comfort. So take off the mask. Not all at once, not to prove a point, but piece by piece, every time you feel yourself disappearing. Choose stillness instead of performance. Choose clarity instead of control. Choose truth, even when it costs you comfort. Because the moment you stop being who the world trained you to be, you start becoming who you were always meant to be. 7. Protect your energy like your life depends on it. Think of your daily energy like the battery on your phone. Constant notifications, apps running in the background, mindless scrolling. How quickly does it drain? Your mental and emotional energy works the same way. Every unnecessary conversation, every reactive thought, every pointless argument, Each one is a hidden app stealing power you never consented to give. Most men don't burn out because of one big event. They drain themselves drop by drop, a comment here, a criticism there, the impulse to reply to every message, the need to always be involved, always be explaining, and always be reacting. Until one day, the tank hits empty, and they wonder why they feel numb. They wonder why they can't focus, why even simple decisions feel heavy. It's not a weakness, it's leakage, and it's happening all day long beneath the surface. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote, "Concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness." That kind of focus requires protected energy, undivided attention. You can't be precise if your mind is split between 10 distractions. You can't be genuine if your emotions are always scattered by outside noise. Energy isn't infinite, it's traded. Every reaction is a transaction, and you're paying with your clarity, your peace, your presence. Now think about the difference between an hour of scrolling through social media arguments versus an hour spent in deep work or a real conversation with someone who sees you. One leaves you restless, irritated, and drained. The other makes you feel grounded, awake, clear. Same amount of time, different outcome. The only difference is where your energy went and whether you chose to give it or let it be taken. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." Most men don't need more time. They need more awareness of how they spend it. The way you use your energy is the way you live your life. If you're constantly giving it to things that don't serve you, arguments, drama, endless notifications, then you're not really living. You're reacting. You're on autopilot, pulled by whatever buzzes next. And the cost isn't just fatigue. It's losing touch with who you are when everything goes quiet. Stoic discipline begins with that silence. It begins with choosing where your attention lands, with noticing the moment you feel yourself getting pulled. And instead of following the pull, you pause. You breathe. You don't jump into every fight, every opinion, every emotional whirlwind. Because you've realized that just because something demands your attention doesn't mean it deserves your energy. Powerful men aren't powerful because they do more. They're powerful because they're selective. They say no, not just to people, but to noise. They don't need to win every debate. They don't scroll endlessly looking for validation. They don't explain themselves to those committed to misunderstanding. They protect their energy like it's sacred. Because it is. And protecting energy isn't passive. It's not sitting in silence hoping things change. It's deliberate. You walk out of a conversation that drains you. You mute the group chat that brings nothing but distraction. You let the phone ring if you're not in the space to answer. You don't defend yourself to someone who just wants control. You guard your mind the same way you'd guard your home, because not everyone gets to walk in. There's a stillness that comes when you live like this, a calm that others feel the moment you enter the room. You no longer rush, you no longer over-explain, you no longer scatter yourself trying to be everywhere for everyone. You speak with intention, you act with weight, and in that weight, you become solid. Someone others lean on, but not someone they can push around. In the end, this is about respect. Not the kind others give you, but the kind you give yourself when you stop wasting the best of who you are on the worst of what the world throws at you. The man who guards his energy isn't avoiding life. He's choosing which life to live. The man who stops reacting to everything isn't indifferent. He's focused, grounded, unshakable. So ask yourself, where is your energy going? Who's holding it? What distractions are bleeding it dry without offering anything in return? Then take it back, bit by bit, choice by choice. Protect it, not because you're fragile, but because you're powerful. And your power isn't in what you give to everyone. It's in what you choose to reserve for what truly matters. 8. Your absence creates your worth. Sometimes the only way to remind people of your light is to turn it off for a while. Not out of spite, not as punishment, but to reset the room, to break the pattern of being taken for granted. When you're always present, always giving, always saying yes, your presence fades into background noise. Even if your value hasn't changed, the way people perceive it has. And perception, not truth, is what shapes their behavior. Many great bands understood this. After years of touring and releasing non-stop, they vanished, took a break, a hiatus. And when they came back, something had shifted. The hunger returned, the absence had created longing, and longing revived attention. Tickets sold out faster, songs hit harder, the same music, the same faces, but now wrapped in the energy of appreciation, because what's scarce becomes sacred, and what's always there becomes expected. It's no different in real life. Mark was a man who held everything up, his job, his family, his responsibilities. He never said no. He was dependable, reliable, always there. Until one day he wasn't. He took a sabbatical, stepped away, not to escape, but to breathe, to reassess, to stop pouring from a cup that hadn't been refilled in years. And when he returned, he noticed something he never expected. People treated him differently. His time was respected. His opinions held more weight. Boundaries he had failed to enforce before now held firm. Not because others changed, but because he did. Because his absence had recalibrated their expectations and his own. The Stoics believed virtue creates value, not recognition. You don't need applause to be worthy. But they also understood human nature. People don't value what they don't have to earn. When you make yourself too available, emotionally, physically, mentally, you become familiar. Predictable, easy to reach, and easy to overlook. It's not fair, but it is real. And reality must be faced with open eyes and a strong spine. Your presence is a gift, but only if it's given wisely. When you hand it out freely, constantly, without pause, it stops feeling like a gift. It becomes a given. And anything that's always given becomes invisible. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reaction to your frequency. And frequency is something you can change. Stoicism doesn't teach withdrawal out of bitterness. It teaches withdrawal as a discipline, as strategy, as clarity. You don't vanish to provoke, you vanish to preserve. You step back, not to cause pain, but to regain perspective. Your absence becomes a filter. It reveals who notices, who steps forward, who reaches out. It also reveals who only stayed because you were easy to access, easy to drain, and easy to lean on. And when that clarity comes, it doesn't hurt, it liberates. Most men think value comes from being needed, from being indispensable. But sometimes the most powerful move is to walk away. Not forever, but long enough to remember who you are when no one is asking anything of you. Long enough for others to realize how much they depended on your silence, your presence, and your effort. And long enough for you to remember you were never meant to be constant, just for the sake of comfort. When done with intention, absence resets relationships, it creates new terms, it teaches others how to treat you. But more than that, it teaches you how to treat yourself. You begin to recognize where your energy was wasted, where your kindness became currency, where your presence was filling spaces it didn't belong. And from that recognition, you start to choose differently. You say no where you used to say yes. You walk away where you used to hold on. You slow down where you used to rush. And in that slowing down, your value begins to rise. Not because you've changed who you are, but because you've changed how much of you is constantly on display. The man who chooses when and where to show up is not selfish. He is strategic. He doesn't need to be everywhere. He needs to be effective. Effectiveness requires rest, distance, and clarity. So step back. Withdraw. Turn off the light, not to punish the room, but to see who truly misses the glow. Let absence do what presence could not. Let it remind them. Let it remind you. Because when you stop being constantly available, you stop being forgettable. You stop being assumed. You start being seen again, not just for your output, but for your essence. And in that stillness, your worth returns. Not because it was ever gone, but because you finally stopped giving it away to people who were never looking. And those who are looking now will know better than to treat your light like background noise again. You've seen what happens when you're always available. When you say yes too often. When you speak too quickly. When your energy is scattered and your presence is assumed. Slowly, you begin to disappear. Not because you've left, but because you've given too much of yourself to people who never had to earn it. But you also now know the power of pulling back, of silence, of choosing where your attention goes, of living with intention, not reaction. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about reclaiming your space, your time, your mind, because that's where your real value lies, not in what others take from you, but in what you choose to give. Every part of this journey is a practice. Saying no with confidence, pausing before you speak, protecting your energy like it's your most limited currency, because it is. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to be everything. You only have to be grounded, clear, and disciplined enough to live by your values, not by their expectations. Start with small steps. Withdraw when it's right. Hold your silence a moment longer. Say yes only when it aligns. Let your absence remind others of your worth, and let your presence reflect your strength. Share your story in the comments below. Where have you felt your energy being drained? What boundaries are you ready to set? Your voice might be the one another man needs to hear today. And always remember this: when you stop being available to everything, you become available to what truly matters. And in that stillness, in that clarity, you become the man the world quietly respects, even when it doesn't say it out loud.